This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, so we're going to speak about an unprecedented topic this morning. You know, we've mentioned that when we say the Torah is a Torah's Chayim, it's a living Torah. Living Torah means that no matter what type of issue that may arise, from the most technologically advanced, the most contemporary issue, the most cutting-edge issue, the Torah will have something to say about it. It doesn't matter how innovative the idea is, even though you say, well, the Torah was given 3,300 years ago, in the year 2448, still, the principles of every issue will be found in the Torah. However, let's say over the last couple of days we spoke a few times about artificial intelligence, and even though you would think, the Torah doesn't have what to say about artificial intelligence, the main principles of artificial intelligence have already been laid out. But the topic we're going to talk about today is an unprecedented topic. It's a topic that will probably be the most difficult to glean principles of behavior from the Torah. And we're going to speak about the ethics of war. Okay? And the reason why this is an unprecedented topic is because since the day the temple was destroyed, there was no even dream of ever having a country and sovereignty and a Jewish army. Who could have ever thought, with hundreds of years of pogroms and crusades and torture and everything that took place in Europe for the last 1,000 years, who could have ever dreamed that we would go back to Eretz Yisrael, establish a sovereignty, whatever your opinion is on the state of Israel, but it's a country, it's a Jewish country, it has an army, and nobody would have ever chalam zech, as they say, no one could have dreamed that we would be facing moral dilemmas of now we're, so to speak, in authority and how we should conduct ourselves. So where do we turn? We're going to look into Shas. We're going to say, what does Abaye say about Jewish war? What did Rava say? What did Rish Lakish say? What does the Mishnah say? The answer is, the Mishnah says nothing, and the Gemara says nothing. Throughout Jewish history, we were never in such a position where we had our own country and army, and we had to face these decisions. So the question is, where do we turn? Where do we look? Now I'll tell you off the bat, and just by way of introduction, I'm going to be quoting today a number of rabbinic authorities that are not necessarily considered accepted by, say, certain, the yeshiva world and so forth. And the fact that I'm citing them is not in any way indicative of my personal acceptance or a lack thereof of these individuals, but we are speaking about this topic. We're speaking about the topic of the ethics of war, and for the sake of completion and intellectual honesty, it's important to know what the various opinions are. I'm going to start with the very interesting opinion of Rav Shaul Yisraeli. Rav Shaul Yisraeli lived from 1909 to 1995. He wrote the single most influential essay on Jewish ethics that sent shockwaves across the Jewish world. And that is, Rav Yisraeli wrote, by the way, Rav Yisraeli grew up in the Belarus. His father was exiled for teaching Torah in the Belarus. He was teaching in the underground. In 1933 he was caught, and his life was on the line. And Rav Yisraeli, his life was saved by Rav Kook. He ultimately came to Eretz Yisrael. He was a student of Rav Kook, Rav Yehuda Kook, and he became the Rosh Hashiva of Merkaz Harav. And he advanced that Judaism does not have moral requirements when it comes to war. That the Torah does not dictate how we behave when it comes to war. There are no guidelines, not in the Gemara, and not in any accepted body of Jewish law of how a war should be fought. What are we subject to? Something called international law, the covenant of humanity. And whatever humanity deems appropriate and moral, we're subject to. Whatever humanity deems immoral, in other words, if humanity says that when you go to war, you're only allowed to target terrorists, you can't target quote-unquote innocent civilians, then that is what we are subject to. If humanity says, whatever the UN decides, or whatever the international community decides, not the UN, if they decide that in war you can only kill men but you can't kill women and children, then that's what we're bound by. But the Torah does not have what to say about war. Now this sends shockwaves. Any war of a Jewish state. What? Amalek is a clear dictate. The Torah says Amalek, you have to eradicate. But anything else, in other words, how we go about fighting war of defense or war of survival, we're not bound by Jewish law, we're bound by international law. By the way, a large segment of Jews in Israel subscribe to this ideology today. Part of...
Which kinds of Jews in Israel suppose this ideology?
Presumably. I'm not sure though, because this is not necessarily the ideology of Rav Kook, but
I know Torah's Chemda quotes him all the time, Eretz Chemda, whatever, sort of the Mizrahi type.
Possibly. Okay. Now, what does it mean Judaism doesn't have a moral requirement? Because this idea is completely foreign to us. Instinctively we recoil when we hear the Torah doesn't have moral requirements when it comes to war, because those who learned in yeshiva, those who have background in learning, are much more familiar with the idea that the Torah governs and dictates every single, the minutia of daily life. From the moment you wake up in the morning, so the first thing you do is you wash your hands, and then you say Moeda'ani, and then you go to the Beis HaKisei, and even how you clean yourself in the Beis HaKisei, of how you mekaneach, which hand do you use, excuse the expression, to clean yourself after you go to the bathroom, even that the Torah has halachas. I mean, you can't just tie your shoes, you have to put on your shoes a certain way. You put on your right shoe, you put on your left shoe. If you're a righty, you tie your left shoe first, and then you tie your right shoe. If you have any lefties over here, so then you tie your shoes differently because you put on tefillin differently. So we're used to the idea that the Torah is the Torah's Chaim, and it has what to say about every single aspect of our lives. So to hear, well, when it comes to war, the Torah does not govern how we fight a war, that's very foreign to us. So, okay, what's the alternative? The alternative is the Torah does have what to say about how to fight a war. So the question is where? Where? As we mentioned, the Gemara doesn't talk about it, the Mishnayos don't talk about it, not the Sifra, really, not the Sifri. So there was a very eminent, we'll call it personality, in the formation of the state of Israel, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was a courageous soldier, who was a great scholar. He comes from Poland, and he came to Palestine at the end of World War II. He fought in the Haganah, he fought in the IDF, he became the chief chaplain of the IDF, he became the chief chaplain of the state of Israel. There are the iconic pictures of him blowing the shofar at the Western Wall. He liberated the Western Wall. He basically single-handedly liberated Hebron until the Israeli government gave the keys back to the Muslims. And he developed the Jewish halachic ethics of war. It's called Meshiv Halacha, which is a major work. And basically he invented the ethics of war. He was the first to invent the ethics of war. Okay? Now, why do I tell you about this? How would you do that? And are there Gedolim today that have what to say about the ethics of war? Now, in a way, it's an academic question. In a way, it's not an academic question. It's an academic question because it's not like Bibi Netanyahu is sitting there in the cabinet room and he summoned Reb Chaim Kanievsky and Reb Aaron Leib Steinman and Reb Gershon Edelstein and say, "No, what do you say?" He's not asking their opinion. He's asking...
At what stage in history did Rav Goren fit in? With regard to Menachem Begin, where did that all fit in?
Before, let's say...
But Menachem Begin went to the Chazon Sofer. What did he know him for going? The Chazon Ish.
What did he go for? I don't know. But there have been situations in Israel where prime ministers have asked Rav Ovadia, should we try to... negotiate with terrorists to release hostages. To what extent they really were listening to their opinion,
Well, there was some sort of level of Das Torah about them, some sort of.
Yeah, I don't know. No. Whether that was just a political move, more. Political move. Yeah. So what we're doing today, in a way, is academic because does it really matter what the halacha says when nobody's seeking out the halachic opinion? But for our own understanding, okay. So let's say we had to try to understand what would the Torah say about the ethics of war. Where would we turn? So, I did throw you for a little bit of a curveball here, because the first segment of the shiur is, since we have nowhere to turn in the Gemara and in the Poskim, the question is, can you learn halacha directly from Chumash? Right? That's the first question. Can you open up a Chumash and learn halacha? We know, if we wanted to know what to do halacha l'maisa, you have the Gemara, you have the Rishonim, and then you have the way it's codified in the Sifrei Halacha, Shulchan Aruch, the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, and the later Poskim. But could you learn halacha straight from Psukim? I'll give you an example. Rav Asher Weiss, you know the name Rav Asher Weiss? He's one of the leading contemporary Poskim today. So somebody came to him, a chashuv, a judge in the state of Israel came to him, and the story goes like this. Definitely don't. A guy killed his wife, and now the shaila is, can he inherit her? She had a big ass, He had a rich father-in-law. She inherited millions of dollars. He killed her, and the glove. I don't know if you're going to get this. The glove didn't fit. No, you don't. Yeah, they. Very good. Okay. They couldn't find him guilty. They couldn't, convict him. Now he wants to know. He's the first heir. He wants to inherit his wife. That was the question. So Rav Asher's wife says, well, it's, the story in Malachim, where Izebel killed Navos Yisraeli because they wanted his vineyard. You know the story? Basically, it's a story in Malachim where Navos HaYisraeli was killed by Izebel because they wanted to give his vineyard to Achav. So what did Eliyahu say? Haratzachta v'gam yarashta? You killed and now you want to inherit? So Rav Asher Weiss says, so here also the guy kills his wife and now he wants to inherit her? But what do you mean? You can't learn halacha from the Nevi'im? What, because there's a pasuk in the Navi that says Haratzachta v'gam yarashta? So now we're going to apply it, halacha l'maisa? Can you or you can't, or can't you? And this is by the way, Rav Asher Weiss points out, it's a double-edged question. Because even if you can you learn out from before the Torah was given? And by the way, even if you can learn out from before the Torah was given, there are certain things we definitely do not learn out from before the Torah was given. For example, Rav Moshe Feinstein has a psak that maybe the Hasidic poskim they're not so happy with, regarding having, this is a good one for South Africans, okay? Having using a secular name and not a Hebrew name. We know there's a value of a Hebrew name. One of the reasons we were redeemed from Egypt is because we didn't change our Hebrew names, and we didn't change our Jewish clothing. Are you supposed to have Jewish clothing? Do you need to wear a shtramel? Even though I think it's probably like the Russian, Russian fur hat from the Siberia or something. But do you need to wear Jewish clothing and have a Jewish name? After all, there's a great value in that. Because in that merit, we were redeemed from Egypt. So Moshe says, yeah, because that was before the Torah was given. So we had no mitzvahs. So the only thing to do was to keep a Jewish name. You should be called Yankel and Beryl, because you can't help old ladies cross the street, and there's no Rimon advisory Yarchei Kallahs. So what are you supposed to do? So then there was a value of having a Jewish name. But after the Torah was given, we have 630 mitzvahs. There's no mitzvah to have a Jewish name. You don't have to have a Jewish name. So clearly, there's obviously a very big difference between before the Torah was given and after the Torah was given. So that's a question, because we know Rav Asher Weiss quotes many halachos that the Bavli does not learn out from Sukkim, but the Yerushalmi does learn out from Sukkim. For example, Avelos. Is that learned out from the Avelos of Aaron HaKohen whose sons died? Or for example, Shivas Yimei HaMishta, Lavan. What about this? Are you allowed to get married on Yom Tif? Could you make a wedding on Yom Tif? You ever have a wedding on Yom Tif? No. Where do we learn that out from? Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. Where does that come from? Lavan, from your grandfather, from your Zayda. Lavan. Right? Lavan says, no, I'm not, you can't marry Rachel now. Malei Shavua Zois, you got to finish the Shavar Brachas first. What do you mean? You're learning out halacha before the Torah was given from Lavan? So it's a question. Can you learn out halacha from narrative in the Chumash? And it seems, Rav Asher Weiss says, it could be, You can't learn out halacha psuka from narrative in the Chumash, but you could learn out a certain proper behavior. In other words, you see in the Tanakh there's a logic. How could you have a guy kill someone and then inherit them? Oh, you can't learn out halacha from the pasuk. I'm not learning out halacha. I'm learning out the correct way to view something. So it's not like I'm learning out an absolute dictate. I'm learning out a certain attitude that we should have towards something. Just for your own knowledge, just to conclude this part, if you look on page 28, it's a good Bekios point. So where do we learn out halacha from? We learn out halacha from Gemara, right? You see page 28? Can you learn out halacha? Now there are two portions of the Gemara. There's the Shmaitza, the halachic portions, and there's Agadata. Could you learn out halacha from Agadata? You know, you have Agadata and Shas. Could you learn out halacha from there? So he brings an interesting machlekes. This is also from Rav Asher Weiss. He brings the machlekes. The Shvus Yaakov holds that the rule ein lameidin halacha me'agada is only if there's a stira between the halachic portion of Shas and the Agadic portion of Shas, you can't learn out from the Agadata. But the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is, period. You can't learn out halachas from Agada. Even though, again, you will find certain things are cited from Agadata. That may just be, we see from the Shas the correct perspective of how to look at something, not necessarily halacha psuka. So the challenge here is, even if we find a precedent in the Chumash that would be comparable to the current dilemmas that we have in a war, are you allowed to learn out from there? And then the next challenge would be, if you're allowed to learn out from there, are there any narratives in the Chumash that could be comparable to the current day dilemmas we have? So
The Jews have been to war. David HaMelech had an army. What did he do with halachas?
Oh, so again, that's not going to be in the Gemara. It's going to be in the Nevi'im and Ksuvim.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try to examine.
David HaMelech would have known how to go to war.
Correct, but still, we can't necessarily learn out from the narrative in the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim. Fine. So, what's like the first war that we find in the Torah? Well, one of the early wars is when Yaakov Avinu had to go out to war against Esav. And again, the moral dilemma that we're dealing with is the kings, the war. There it's a little different. There you have 4 kings against 5 kings. None of them were Jewish. So what either did is that going to be relevant to us? Avram went to save Lot from a party who they were waging war against another. Right. So that's an earlier war. Right. That is a mention of war.
Shimon and Levi, does that count?
Okay, yeah, we're going to come to that. Very good. Okay, so we have in Vayishlach, Yaakov Avinu is about to encounter Esav. The main moral dilemma we're dealing with is, if let's say you have 1,000 terrorists that run out of a society, and then they run back in, now to what level of responsibility does the entire society have? Do you have to only target the terrorists? Do you have to cherry pick the terrorists? Do you have to start interviewing people? Are you a terrorist or are you a nice Palestinian?
It doesn't matter that they voted in the terrorists.
Right. But the question is, what level of responsibility do they have? Are they liable? Are they culpable? Do we have any level of responsibility to weed them out? Yeah.
Wouldn't the first example be with the Mitzrayim?
That what?
Chasing the Yidden? And we see that Hashem destroyed them all.
Right, well, God destroyed them all.
And Davening and everyone else down.
Possibly. Let's turn to Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov is about to encounter Esav, and the pasuk says, "Vayira Yaakov ad vayitzer." Yaakov was very afraid, and he was distressed. So Rashi says he was afraid lest he get killed, and he was distressed lest he kill others. So here Yaakov is going to war, and he's distressed. I understand I have to kill Esav, but what about, sort of the quote unquote the innocent civilians in Esav's camp? So you know what the Israeli army does? They were really the inventors of something called door knocking. So what's door knocking? Basically, they'll send text messages, they'll send leaflets. Dearest Palestinian brothers, we're about to bomb the living daylights out of this area. All innocent civilians, please pack your bags, pack a pita, some falafel, and leave, so that only the terrorists stay behind. And so now, that is not necessarily the most practical way to fight a war. Because if you're targeting the terrorists, they know you're coming, But still, that's what the state of Israel does. And then, what happened was, these innocent civilians, they don't want to move, because they want to harbor the terrorists. So then they bomb, they've created bombs that make a lot of noise and don't kill anyone, so they frighten. Where does this come from? Does this have to be done? How much do we have to twist ourselves into a pretzel to put stumbling blocks and hurdles in the way of our war effort to try to save quote-unquote innocent lives? So the first example of this in Tanakh, look on page 6. Who was talking about, Brett was talking about Amalek, right? So we find that when Shaul went to war against Amalek, the problem was that embedded in Amalek was the family of the Keni, that's the family of Yisrael. So now what's Shaul supposed to do? He has to kill Amalek. The problem is that the Keni is embedded there. So here, this is the forerunner of door knocking. Look what he says on page 6. Vayomer Shaul ala Keni. So Shaul sends word to the Keni. L'chu suru redu mitech Amaleki. Get out of here, scram! Penoi sivcha imoi, lest you be destroyed. Now, says Shaul, you know why I'm so concerned for your life? Va'ata asisa chesedim kol bnei Yisrael. Yisrael, your forefather, did kindness with all of Israel. Ba'aloisam yimsam, when they came out of Egypt. Va'yasar keni b'tech Amalek. So the Keni left. So this is cited, let's say, as the source, the precedent that when you go to war, you're supposed to give warning to the innocent civilians to run away. But is this really good precedent? Because if you look carefully in the Pasuk says the reason Shaul is doing this is because he had a debt of gratitude to the family of Yisrael. We don't have any debt of gratitude to the people living in the Gaza right now. We're the ones who gave them one of the most lush areas in the world, and we gave it to them, and they used it to build tunnels and to harbor terrorists. So some would argue, well, we have to follow what it says in Shmuel and give the innocent civilians advance warning. Well, but the Pasuk says that this was a specific reason because they're our cousins and we owe them a debt of gratitude. So this is the challenge that we have, to try to identify a source in the Chumash or in the Nevi'im Ksuvim that can be used as a paradigm of how we should proceed with war. The next segment of this topic is the very interesting and important topic of the value of human life. We know that in Halacha, Jewish life is of the greatest value. So if Shabbos is a very important mitzvah, one has to give up all their money to observe the Shabbos, but one does not have to put their life in danger to keep Shabbos. Because Jewish life is more important than mitzvah observance. So if there was a fire and the Sefer Torah was burning on Shabbos, what do you do? What do you do? The shul's on fire. Could you rescue Sefer Torah on Shabbos? No, can't.
Can you do it to people?
What? I don't think so. No.
So I remember when I was in Yeshiva Ketana, a year before I arrived there was a fire on Shabbos. And it was a Rechomet, so it was Rabbi Simcha Klein Cook. He was actually that Shabbos, he was there giving a thing on Friday night. And then we went upstairs and lit candles and started a fire. Apparently, that's what they said, that Rabbi Simcha Klein Cook and Rosh Hashanah went together and they threw water next to it. And it blew out the...
So there are outside factors. One of the outside factors is that when there's a fire in a congested neighborhood, it could spread and it could endanger life. So then you're really doing it to save life. But you're mitigating but let's say, in a laboratory, all there was a Sefer Torah. You can't save a Sefer Torah on Shabbos. But what if there was a Jew whose life was in danger, who they were a goyses and they were going to die in a minute anyway, and they were not Torah observant? Could you desecrate Shabbos to save the life of a Jew, to add one more millisecond to their life? Yes. So what does that show? That shows that as important as Torah mitzvahs are, the life of a Jew is of supreme value. The question is, what does the Torah say about the value of human life? Not Jewish life, human life, that's part 2. I want you to take a look at page 7, 8, and 9. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes and just, basically skim through it, okay? Okay, we're continuing this topic. Ethics of war. Okay, the next part is the value of human life, not just Jewish life. And as you've seen in the booklet, Rav Goren began his building of the edifice of what he calls the morality of war based on research of various texts of the Mishnah and Sanhedrin that says, when God created the world, He created millions of kangaroos, millions of koalas, millions of platypuses. How do you say them plural? Platypusi? I don't know. So, platypi. And yet He created one man. Why? The Mishnah says, Lefikach nivra adam yichidi, therefore God created one man. Lelamedcha, to teach you that if you destroy one nefesh mi Yisrael, it's like you destroyed the whole world. And anyone who saves one Jewish life, it's like he saved the whole world. So there are various texts. The Rambam in different places codifies this halacha differently. Some texts have the word mi Yisrael, which then puts the supreme value on Jewish life. Other texts, which Rav Goren says that the most authentic text of what he calls the Minshin, the Munich Shas, is without the word Yisrael. He says, Baroiv Kisayad Shal Mishnah, we don't have the word Yisrael in the Kaufman text, in the Cambridge text, in the Rambam's text, we don't have the word Mi Yisrael. In other words, God created one man. Was Adam HaRishon Jewish? Kabbalistically, there is a discussion about this. In other words, Adam HaRishon was a man, he was a human, he wasn't a Jew. But still, there's an idea that all the souls of the Jewish people perhaps hinged on Adam HaRishon. Be it as it may, there's a question. When Chazal say that by saving one life it's like saving the whole world, or by destroying one life it's like destroying the whole world, are they referring specifically to Jewish life or human life? Okay, now, I heard it was discussed. Does that mean, according to the Gersa, that someone who saves one life, it's like he saved the whole world? Are you allowed to desecrate Shabbos to save the life of Oivei Kochav Mazalos? No, you can't. You're not allowed to. So even in Rabbi Goren's world, in other words, this is not I wouldn't call this the traditional approach to how to approach a halachic subject, to do a analysis of the various original texts of the Gemara. In other words, you wouldn't see this typically in a halachic discussion of any of the Shalos Tshuva Svarim. How do we view this issue? Let's go to all the universities and all the original texts of the Gemara, but we don't really have any precedent over here. And he is trying to build the edifice of what is the value of human life in general. And it is of note that some versions have Mi Yisrael and some versions do not have Mi Yisrael. What is this dependent on? What's very interesting, if you look on page 9, is that there's a famous machlokes. It's Yushalmi in Nedarim. It's a Toras Kainim in Kedoshim. There's a famous machlokes. What is the most important pasuk in the Torah? Rabbi Kiva famously says, it's V'yahavta l'reacha kamaycha. It's V'yahavta l'reacha kamaycha. And Ben Azai says, no, it's not V'yahavta l'reacha kamaycha. It's Zeh Sefer Todas Adam. So he says, what's machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai? It's this dispute. In the world of Rabbi Akiva, the most important ideal is v'yahavta l'reacha. Who's reacha? Reacha b'mitzvos. A friend who observes mitzvos like you. Another Jew. By the way, it's not only another Jew, it's another Torah observant Jew. A Jew who doesn't observe Torah, halachically, technically, the mitzvah of reyos does not apply. The mitzvah of v'yahavta l'reacha kamocha applies to Jews who are shomrei Torah or mitzvahs. Okay? Reacha is a very specific term, meaning in the world of Rabbi Akiva, the ultimate ideal is ahavas Yisrael. But Ben Azai says, no, zeh sefer todas adam. It's the love of humanity. Because all of humanity was created in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it comes out, in the world of Rabbi Akiva, maybe the text would be Kal Makayim Nefesh Achas Mi Yisrael. In the world of Ben Azai, Kal Makayim Nefesh Achas. And Rav Goren looks at it that basically there are two ideals. The more every Jew has to have an intense love for the Jewish people, but there is an ideal of, hey bro, there is a covenant of humanity. There should be, in other words, the healthy, correct Torah attitude should be that I love my people more than anything else. But I don't have a But all human beings were created in the image of Hashem, and all human beings, therefore, are worthy of my respect and my good-hearted nature. But of course, I'm dedicated to my people. Since I have limited time and resources, I'm going to dedicate my time and resources to my own people. That's only natural. That's only logical, and that's only expected. In other words, a Jew should not be dedicated to the common human good. I mean, we have limited time and limited resources. We have to help our own. But that doesn't mean that we have a derogatory view or we disparage any of mankind. Now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein writes, unfortunately for 2,000 years, they brutalized us, so it gets a little bit tricky how to properly navigate such an attitude. In other words, just say a little bit off the record, but in certain Chasidus, they have a great value of being a light unto society, a light unto the world, right? Yeah, the Jews was a light unto the world. So Moshe said, like we tried, but after they tried to kill us for about 2,000 years, we took a step back from that one. We can't do that anymore. And other groups say no, we have to hold up the ideal of Yishai. No, but Moshe says, didn't work out. Anyway, what I want to do, just for the sake of time, because I really want you to focus more on the lamdus than this part of the sugya, I'm going to just move this along a little bit, okay? Let's move on to the next topic. Rabbi Lior mentioned that perhaps a very good precedent of this subject of innocent civilians should be the war of Shimon and Levi against the city of Shechem. You all know the story. Yaakov Avinu and his family, they were living in the city of Shechem, and in Shechem, and Shechem ben Chamar sees Dinah, right? He wants Dinah. Actually, what's very interesting is that he vatidbak nafshoy bedina bas Yaakov. He was like cleaving. He couldn't get her out of his mind. And the Mesilas Yesharim brings, we learn out deveikus to Hashem from the feelings of deveikus that Shechem had to Dinah. Okay? And he abducted her and he violated her. And Shimon and Levi, like good brothers, wouldn't stand for it. So they had this whole ruse. He said, if you want to join forces with us, you all have to have a milah. So they called the local mayal. They all circumcised themselves, and then Shimon and Levi, wiped out the whole city. So the Rishonim ask, were they allowed to do that? Maybe Shechem violated, he raped Dinah, so maybe they had a right to kill him. But the rest of the Chevra over there, they're innocent civilians. So this is going to be a very solid precedent, because here's a situation where you got one terrorist, Shechem, but a bomb was dropped on the whole city. Yeah? Fine. So we have, over here we have Machlekes Ramban.
Yaakov did criticize.
Good, excellent point. What's your Brad? You're Brad, and this tzaddik is Brett.
You were by his house Shabbos for the leadership.
I know that.
But he wasn't there.
Yeah, we're not going to forget that part either. Fine. So he's a tzaddik. He's not by the he can't come. Don't bust the chops on that one. Okay, so basically the Rambam at the end of Parak Tes, I'm now on page 11, on Hilchos Malachim Halachic Daled, justifies what Shimon and Levi did. This is still in the Sefer, because Gary's going to ask me, what am I quoting now? That this is from the Sefer Meishav Malchama of Rav Goren. He quotes the Rambam, who says that how are Shimon and Levi justified in doing what they did? That since Bnei Noach are commanded on dinim, one of the Shemes Noach is dinim, and obviously if there is an individual in the city that raped a woman and they did not try him and then take him to court and try to administer justice, so they failed to observe the dictate of setting up dinim, they're all chayiv misa. So therefore Shimon and Levi had a right to execute judgment against the whole city, because this guy raped a woman and the rest of them were violating setting up dinim. That's the opinion of the Rambam. So according to the Rambam, they acted correctly. Now, so it would come out, right, in Gaza. So you have, now it's ridiculous because 1,000 terrorists, most of them who work for the UNR, right, 1,000 of them, they came and they brutalized and terrorized Jewish civilians. And when they came back, they were celebrated. And this was a power that voted in. But one thing's for sure: they were not tried. They were not taken to court. There were no legal proceedings against these terrorists. So what would the Rambam say about what our responsibility is in Gaza? It's pretty comparable, because if in Shechem there was one person who committed an atrocity and the whole city is chayiv misa, and Shimon Levi did the right thing, then we have no restrictions. We're not hindered by anything in what we have to do in Gaza, according to the opinion of the Rambam. However, the Ramban asks, he says, really, if in that case, then if they were obligated to get out the city, Brad, then why didn't Yaakov Avinu join them in destroying the whole city? And why did he curse them many years later, like you pointed out? And says the Ramban, the answer is that even though they were all guilty, but that doesn't give right to Shimon and Levi to administer justice. Just because someone is technically liable to a death penalty doesn't mean you've been hired as the executioner.
Could we take a better example? The Torah Olam did it himself on the Torah model. They weren't all, maybe most of them, but if most of the Kahila is doing the Aveira, you can wipe them out.
No, you can't learn out from what Hashem does, because, that would be like saying, God wiped out the Dar HaMabel, so now we could go around like Rambo and just knocking off people who steal. You can't, it's God. One thing's for sure, you can emulate the midos of Hashem, but we're not authorized to just follow the actions that we see that Hashem. No, that we won't be able to do, right? So,
but Shechem, he was a leader. The little people, the little guys in the city, how can they go against the king, or whoever it is, and start saying, "I will take you to court"? There wasn't it's a dictatorship. It's not a.
So you're saying the Rambam's opinion that they're all guilty. The question on that will be, really, was it expected that the city try the leader?
Yeah.
So you're saying in Gaza there's a higher level of guilt on the civilians than there should have been in the city of Shechem? You're saying in Gaza there's a higher level, because you can't expect...
Gaza, I would say, is the same.
Why? Because could it...
Average Palestinian goes and says, we're going to try, they'll throw him off a cliff.
Right. You're saying it's similar. It's similar.
If they ultimately guilty, they learn this Parsha somehow, they were guilty.
Right, in other words, there's no question of the communal guilt. The question is whether Shimon and Levi are justified in executing judgment just because people are guilty. So Ramban learns they did not do the right thing.
But was the most of the community doing these acts in any event? Were the chayev themselves? I know, not in the specific act.
Where, in Shechem?
Andres Doim, they deserve...
No. The people in Shechem, we don't find that they were going around being ma'anis women. Right. No. But they didn't protest. So again, the Ramban disagrees with the Rambam. The Ramban learns that fundamentally, Shimon and Levi did not do the right thing. And moreover, the Ramban says that from a security standpoint, Yaakov Avinu was telling them that you can't wipe out the city because you're endangering our lives, because the people in the surrounding areas are going to find out. In other words, if Syria and Iran and Saudi Arabia find out what you did, they're going to put our lives in danger. So from a halachic standpoint, from a security standpoint, you didn't do the right thing. So in a nutshell, were Shimon and Levi justified? The Rambam says yes, the Ramban says no. So applying that to Gaza, are we justified in not cherry picking and targeting the terrorists? Do we have a right to, so to speak, carpet bomb the area? It would seem to be a machlekes Ramban. However, Rav Goren says even the Rambam would agree that even though you're halachically justified, you still shouldn't do it.
Well, isn't there a comeback from Shimon Levi to Yaakov Avinu? Good, because very excellent. Well, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Reb Sam is saying, well, when Yaakov criticized them, and he said, why are you le'achreni b'yosher, you're sullying my reputation, Shimon and Levi say that, hey, hakazoina yasas achisenu. We should just let our sister be violated. Now, is that a halachic reply? Is that just like a kid responding to you would expect that if the Torah gave them the last word, then indeed they're justifying themselves. However, Rav Goren points out that many, many years later, when Yaakov Avinu was lying on his deathbed, he had the final word. Because he said to them, cursed is your anger, for it is furious. And Rav Goren says that even though technically, according to the Rambam, they did the right thing, but Yaakov still felt they were wrong. And the reason he felt they were wrong, I would like you now to learn a story in the Yerushalmi on page 46. And it's the Yerushalmi in Trumos, Parak Ches, with the commentary of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. The main story begins on the 5th line, Ula bar Koisev, but you could read it from the beginning. I'm giving you 3.5 minutes for this one. Okay. Go. So as mentioned, Rav Goren said that the situation in Sidoi, in Shechem, was machlokes the Rambam and the Ramban. According to the Rambam, they did the right thing because all of Shechem was guilty because they didn't appoint Dayanim, and according to the Ramban, they did not do the right thing. But, says Rav Goren, even according to the Rambam, there's a very strong case that Shimon and Levi still did the wrong thing, as evident by the fact that ultimately Yaakov Avinu had the final word, Arur Apam Kiyaz in Parshas Vayechi, and based on the following Yerushalmi. This Yerushalmi, Bez Hashem, we're going to come back to at the end of the shir. The Yerushalmi tells us like this. First, Yerushalmi says that if you have a group of Jews that are traveling, and Goyim come and they say, give us one of them, otherwise we're going to kill everyone. So what's the halacha? Are you allowed to give... In other words, they say, you guys are 100, give us one or we kill everybody. You're not allowed to give over one person unless they designate and they say, give us Beryl. If you give us Beryl, you'll all be good. If you don't give us Beryl, we're going to kill everyone. So they designated. So it's machlokes, does Beryl have to be chayiv misa or does Beryl not have to be chayiv misa? But if they designate someone, you have to give over the designated person. Otherwise, then you're allowed to give over the designated person. Okay?
If someone from the group walks out, do you have a mitzvah to stop him?
No, you don't have to. Fine. So now we have the following story. Okay, this is on the 5th line. I want to read inside. Ula bar Koisev Tavate Malchusa. Ula bar Koisev was a wanted man. Okay? This is page 46. Arak, he fled v'azal le'lalud, Gabri Rabbi ben Levi. He fled to Lud to Rabbi ben Levi. Asun va'akvan medinta. They surrounded the city. Amru lahen. So the Gentiles said, in lesa atun yavan le lan anan machriv medinta. If you don't give us Ula bar Koisev, we're going to destroy the whole country, the whole city. Salak gabe Rabbi ben Levi. So Rabbi ben Levi, realizing that Ula bar Koisev is the key to saving the city, Rabbi ben Levi goes to him. Upaise, he persuades him. He said, look, either way you're going to die, you might as well save us. V'yahave line. And he went ahead. Ula bar Koisev gave himself up. V'have Eliyahu zachor latov yolef miskalei aloi v'lo iskalei. Eliyahu Hanavi used to reveal himself to Rabbi ben Levi, and Eliyahu stopped revealing himself to Rabbi ben Levi. He no longer revealed himself to Rabbi ben Levi. And Rabbi ben Levi was upset, like, what did I do wrong? Why is Eliyahu not coming to me? V'tzam kamat Simon, he fasted many fasts. The iskali aloi, and he revealed. So Eliyahu comes back to Rabbi ben Levi. Amar le v'lemasayres anin ligla. Eliyahu says, I should reveal myself to a maisar. You're a tattler. You gave over a Jew to be killed. Amar le, but Rabbi ben Levi said, v'loi mishnah sisi. I followed the halacha. The halacha is if somebody is designated, we could give him up. So I didn't do anything wrong. I followed the halacha. Amar le v'zu mishnas chasidim. You followed the halacha, but is the halacha what is required of righteous people? Says Rav Goren, from here we see a very important rule. That even though when it comes to regular subjects, you follow the halacha, But here we see that when you follow the halacha, it doesn't mean you did the right thing. You could follow the halacha, and Eliyahu could say, you still didn't do the right thing. Why? Because, says Rav Goren, when it comes to human life, you can't just follow the halacha. When it comes to human life, you have to go above and beyond the call of duty. Human life is so important, it is of such supreme value, that even though, according to Rambam, you could say halachically, Shimon and Levi did the right thing because they didn't appoint judges. Nevertheless, you see from the Yerushalmi that when it comes to human life, you need to twist yourself into a pretzel and jump through hoops to do whatever you can to preserve human life.
All these human lives we talked about here, all hidden.
Good point. And what's your name?
Mishael.
What?
Mishael.
Mishael is saying, well, okay, we see that when it comes to life, you need to go above and beyond the call of duty, but maybe that's only by the life of a Jew, because the halacha would be that if he would have been a Gentile, you would have been allowed to give it to him. Not only that, if you have a city, and they say, give us one of the people, and there's an Ovei Kachav Mazolos there, Rav Goren brings another proof.
Sorry, what's the word? Is this Chaim Kanievsky?
I believe so, yeah. I'm not using his commentary on this one.
He's also saying that.
What does he say?
Well, he was saying that Eliyahu just said to him, you shouldn't have done this, you should have got other people to do it. Meaning, it's like the opposite of what he's saying.
Okay. Okay, let me come back to that, okay? Because I never learned Yisham with this commentary. I haven't seen that, but good point, okay? So Rav Goren says, we see from the Yerushalmi that even though there is a halachic requirement when it comes to war, but when it comes to human life, you have to go above and beyond the call of duty. And another proof he brings is, Bezin has the capacity to give capital punishment, but yet the Gemara says that a Bezin that gives capital punishment more than once every 70 years is considered a murderous court. Why? But aren't they obligated to give capital punishment when it's called for? The answer is, yeah, they're obligated, but when it comes to human life, you have to go above and beyond the call of duty. So, Brett was saying, and I also came to the same conclusion, but not based on the commentary of Chaim Kanievsky, because I honestly never looked at the commentary of Chaim Kanievsky on this Gemara. I just happened to need a Yerushalmi and I copied the page. I came to this conclusion based on the Mesilas Yesharim that I saw on Shabbos, because I kept on saying, what does the shofar say? No, what is the message of the shofar?
Musar.
To learn Musar. The thing was, I also have to learn Musar. So in the house, I had a few minutes, so I took out your Mesilas Yesharim. Otherwise, I can't tell people to learn Musar if I don't try to learn Musar. And I opened up randomly to Bebeir Midas HaChasidus, and the Mesilas Yesharim quotes this Yerushalmi. I couldn't believe it. And he says that from this Yerushalmi you see that even though most people are supposed to try to follow the baseline law, but there's a spirit of the law that people on a higher level need to try to aspire to. So in other words, I would argue, in other words, I would humbly suggest that you could take an alternative view on this Yerushalmi, which is what Brett is saying, and is how Reb Chaim Kanievsky learns the Gemara. And I'm going to come back to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and the reason I didn't learn this way, because the Chazon Ish doesn't learn it this way, and that is, do you see from the Yerushalmi that when it comes to human life, you need to take the higher road? Or do you see from the Yerushalmi that if your name is Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and you're a Gadol Hadar, you need to take the higher road? So when it says V'lav Mishnas Chasidim, Ein lechasid kamoicha, you call yourself a chassid, you call yourself a great rabbi, then you can't just say, well, that's what the halacha says, so I'm going to do it. You have to live to a higher standard. So Rav Goren says we see from here that when it comes to human life, you have to take the higher road. But is that necessarily conclusive? It could be that if you're a chassid, you need to take the higher road. And that's really what the Mesilas Yesharim derives from this Yerushalmi, that there's an idea of Mishnas Chasidim. What does he use that for? Let me give you an example. What's the halacha? If you're learning and you touch your feet, so you got to go wash your hands, right? Because there's tuma, or or if somebody uses the restroom. But what if you eat a piece of chocolate cake, right? And your hands are full of chocolate cake. Are you allowed to make a bracha right now? Your hands are dirtier than if it would, what's halacha if you scratch your head? You're supposed to wash your hands, while you're learning. If you scratch. But you say, but I used shampoo last night and conditioner. My head is clean. But if you eat a piece of chocolate cake and you look like Cookie Monster, you're allowed to make a bracha, right? But Mesilas Yesharim says, okay, yeah, technically allowed to make a bracha. But what if you were talking to a king? Would you go in front of a king with like that? Probably not. So even though halachic you're allowed to, if you're someone who's on a high level is supposed to think, well, am I treating my service of Hashem like I would if it would be a Melech B'Asam? And he quotes this Gemara, this Yushalmi, that there's a concept of Mishnah's Chasidim. So again, Rav Goren's value system is based on this Yushalmi, and I think it's debatable whether you can glean that this is whether you really see from this Yushalmi that when it comes to human life you have to take the high road. Now, I want to raise one question on the Yushalmi because I want to come back to it at the end, and that is, could somebody please tell me, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Eliyahu Hanavi stopped visiting him because Eliyahu held he was doing the wrong thing. What should he have done? He should have had everyone die? Now, in other words, Eliyahu says, bad boy, Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Naughty. He said, what did I do wrong? But the halacha is, if they designate someone, I do give him over. Yeah, but so Eliyahu says, that's the halacha, but you should go above and beyond the call of duty. And what? Do something dumb and have everyone die? What should he have done?
Someone else.
So I had never seen Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Because we're going to see the Chazon Ish ask this question. He doesn't give this answer. So what would Reb Chaim say? Yeah, have another guy do it.
That seems a cop out to me.
What?
It seems a cop out to me. It's like, they say the sort of the famous stories, like
I don't open the bottle. You want to open it for me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, if someone's dying on whatever, Pikuach Nefesh, and you have to do Halachic Shabbos or Yom Tov, or, Yom Kippur or whatever. And they say the stories of the Gedolim, they would go and do it b'dav for them. To say, as if the halacha is that's how you save people.
Then he should do it himself.
Yeah, this is not, you're not killing someone, you're actually saving the rest of everybody.
But in society, there's always different levels of people. So here you have such a guys a chosid. Let's help you out. So because we're helping you out, we give it to another guy in society that can take it.
He's pointing out if somebody's life is in danger, so the halacha is the tzaddikim are supposed to be Mechal Shabbos to save his life.
So why?
At the end of the Shiur, really by very soon, we need to see the Chazon Ish has a different take on this Yushalmi. Okay, now we move on. I'm going to give you I'm giving you 5 minutes now to look at the Maral on page 15. Okay, it's the paragraph Hakosav Omer, and from this Maral, most Poskim, in other words, Rav Goren looks at the story of Shimon and Levi, and he says the Ramban would say they weren't allowed to do it, and even the Rambam says you're allowed to do it. That's only halachically, but ultimately Yaakov Avinu had the final word. And even if they were allowed to, they should follow a higher call of duty. Basically, the way Rav Goren looks at it is, like when it comes to human life, the Jewish people are expected to all act like tzaddikim in the eyes of the world. Okay? And from this Gur Aryeh, most Poskim come to the exact opposite conclusion of Rav Goren, looking at the same story of Shimon Levi, and deriving from here, not only that are you allowed to, but you have to. Okay? So take a look, page 15. 5 minutes. Okay, in a certain sense, this Mar Makom is the central Mar Makom of the topic. Because, Rav Goren has a whole approach to the value of human life and going above and beyond. Here we have the Maral, the Gur Aryeh, which is really invoked. I know Rav Hershel Schachter has a sefer, I believe Be'ikvei Hatzayin, where he cites this Gur Aryeh Halach L'maisa. Rav Asher Weiss also cites this Gur Aryeh Halach L'maisa. And let's see it quickly. He quotes the Rambam, where the Rambam says that B'nai Noach are Metzuva on Dinim, and by not trying Shechem for his crime, they're all guilty. If you look 5 lines on the bottom on the right-hand side, he says, Devar temahim elu hadvarim. The truth is, the words of the Rambam are wondrous, meaning he doesn't agree with them. Ki eich efshar lohem ladan as ben hanasi aretz. I remember what Michal pointed out, how we expect or the regular citizen to try the leader of the community. They were afraid of Shechem. Even though Goyim are commanded to set up courts, that's if they're able to, but not if there's extenuating circumstances. How could they have been expected to judge them? So to say that they were guilty because they didn't set up courts, that is improbable, says the Maharal.
Why can the Maharal argue on the Rambam and the Rambam?
Can the Maharal? Okay, that's a good question. Can an Achroin argue on a Rishain? Yes.
No. Even two Rishain?
Yes.
If you're the Maharal.
And now here's the thing. An Amoira can't really argue on a Tana. And a Rishon can argue on a Gemara. The Kesef Mishnah asks why there seems to have been a consensus that when the Talmud was sealed, that they had a treaty, a covenant, or even a conference that, a sealed book. There's no such official law that a Rishon can argue on an Achron can argue on a Rishon. Halachically, you won't really see it. It's rare to see it. The Gra will do it sometimes. Hashkafically, it's more common. The Maharal, this is not really. See, the thing is, this is a sefer on Chumash. It's a purest on Chumash. So a purest on Chumash, it's more likely. Okay. Venira Deloy Kashimide says Maharal. It's not difficult at all. Mishum Deloy Dami Shnei Umais. It's not similar because here you have two nations. Kugain Bnei Yisrael Uknaniim. Israel and the Canaanites, to him Shnei Umais, they are two different nations. How do we know they're two different nations? Because the Canaanim say, let's become one nation. That until now, there were two nations. You ready? This is the main thing. Hutar lahem lilchaim. Shimon and Levi were allowed to fight. Kedin uma sheba lilchaim al uma acheres. Like one nation that comes to wage war against another nation. Shehitira ha-Torah. The Torah allows war. When nation A fights nation B can then obliterate nation A. That's what a war is. What's a war? A war is nation A attacks nation B, and nation B sends shalach manas to nation A. What is a war? A war is when you're attacked, you attack back. When you attack back, there is no time for now having a survey. Are you a nice Palestinian or are you not a nice Palestinian? Doesn't the Torah say that if you're approaching a city to wage war, you need to advance in peace? That's this. Hainu, I skipped 2 lines. That's if they didn't instigate against us. So if you're advancing and you're conquering land that God has given to the Jewish people, or you want to expand your borders, then if they have never started up with you, you say, Reb nation of the world, we are coming to take the land God gave us, or we're coming to expand our borders. We are happy if you would like to be loyal citizens and pay taxes to us, no problem. Otherwise, we're going to destroy the city. That's when you have to advance in peace. But if they instigated, like but in this case, a member of nation A went out and attacked nation B, like Shechem did, he did a despicable act, even though only one of them acted. Is he a member of the nation? Is he not a member of the nation? Is he a member of Shechem? He's a member of Shechem. So when those thousands of Palestinians left Gaza, did they do it as a member of this society or not? Certainly yes. You are a representative of your country.
Can anybody be? He was the Nasi, so we understand he's a representative.
Anyone. It doesn't matter who. Now,
Moni decides I want to be minus that woman from that nation. That's a representative.
Yes, according to Maharal. Kivan de Meklal ha'amhu, he's part of the nation. Kivan shepartzel amtchila, they breached the barrier. Mutarim likach nikmasam mehem, you're allowed to take revenge. V'hachenami kol hamilchamos shehem nimtzam. This is the nature of all wars. Kagoin sororas hamidyanim. Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded, torment the Midianites. Why? Because they started up with us. What do you mean there were many innocent civilians? Doesn't matter. If they were members of the nation that did evil, Mutarim lavoi alehem l'milchama. You're allowed to wage war. V'chein heim kol hamilchamais. This is the nature of all war. So Rav Goren looks at the story of Shimon and Levi, and he creates a whole system of morality that basically the Ramban says you can't do it even according to the Rambam. Yaakov had the last word, so you have to take extra legal measures. And the Maral says, let's look at Shimon and Levi, and we derive from there that if you have two nations, and nation one stepped over the border and they attacked us, they're finished. They're finished. Now, there was a sefer called Torah HaMelech, written by Rabbi Yitzchak Shapiro and Rabbi Yosef Eliezer, and they cited this Maral, and the book was brought to the Supreme Court of the State of Israel for incitement, and it was almost it was deliberated whether it was a federal crime to print this halacha based on the Maral. Now there's a little bit of a nuance of difference. What does the Maral mean? Does the Maral mean that? So here's the danger over here. So does that mean on the flip side, if a Jewish settler goes into the West Bank and as an isolated person, does something, so now what? Now they could send rockets. Now are they licensed to learn like the Maral?
So the West Bank could go nuts on us.
Yeah, right?
We didn't do anything.
No, if one person, he's Jewish, he's part of the nation.
Rabbi Glatstein.
Now, so here's the question.
So we have to look at how they just want to expand their borders. Like the other way that you can go in. So Israel wants to expand their border.
Yeah.
And they say, if you give it over to us in Esau, we're coming to.
Yeah.
So either way, you can find a way to
I'm saying, let's say we wanted to expand our borders in a halachically sanctioned way when at the appropriate time. So then we have to advance in peace. Now, if they don't respond in kind, then that's.
It seems like either way you could.
No, but if they accept our advance in peace, then we have to work with that.
Yeah, but if they don't, then go to war.
Correct. Now, just for the sake of time over here, does the Maral mean that since they're a member of the nation, the entire nation has collective responsibility, and therefore they're not really innocent because they are part of the nation from which this evil person emerged? Or does the Maral just mean you're allowed to go to war, and when you go to war, you're not required to start making a survey who's good and who's bad for the value of war, which has been authorized? You're allowed to kill people even though they're not responsible. Is it that they are responsible? And is the reason they're responsible, in other words, if one of ours did that, then maybe a way to be acquitted from collective responsibility is if we tried the person and we executed judgment against them, so then we're saying, no, you didn't act on our behalf. So what the Maral is saying is, since Shechem did this, it's not that they're all guilty because they didn't try him. It's once he did this, so now we're authorized to go to war. If they would have tried him, that would have exempted them that would have given them protection from us going to war. Okay, so most poskim do follow this line of reasoning of the Maral of Prague. Yeah?
But they were owners. They couldn't have tried them.
Doesn't matter. You're right. But we're allowed to go to war. You had an opt-out. You decided not to exercise it. And we're not saying you're guilty for not exercising, but the reality is we're allowed to go to war.
Unless they...
Yeah, unless, right.
What's
now,
the sort of difference with the settlers and like we try them and bring them to account.
Right, that would be a difference.
And we try to make peace first as well.
Okay, we have 15 minutes, so here's what we're going to do. I want to do three things. We have to do part 5, which is page 21. Part 5 is the Minchas Chinuch, the Morei Mesadeh, and the Brisker Rav. They all say the same point, and I'm going to just give you a little... I'm just going to prepare you so that you can see what they say, and that is one very important question. Are you allowed to risk your life to keep Shabbos? No. Let's say a person says, I really believe in Shabbos very much, and the only way I could keep the Shabbos is if I jump in front of a train. You're allowed to jump in front of a train to keep Shabbos? No, you can't do that. Let's say the only way you could get tefillin is while a train is coming, you're going to jump in front of it to stop it to get your tefillin. You're allowed to risk your life to put on tefillin. You're not allowed to. Is a Jew allowed to join the Jewish army? Are you allowed to fight in a war? is a Jew allowed to fight in the war? Now don't say, well, it's not dangerous to fight in the war because you could work in IT. I'm not talking about working in IT. Can a Jew be a soldier? Now, by the way, the definition of being a soldier means you're risking your life. Are you allowed? So you say, well, it's to save other lives. First of all, we learned on Shabbos, are you allowed to risk your life to save another Jew? No, I'll do that. Your life takes precedence.
But you're saving your own life by joining the army.
Are you saying?
Because yes, you put yourself in danger, but
what if are you allowed to be a soldier in the Jewish army if it's a Milchemes Rishus? It's a discretionary war.
But Milchemes Mitzvah.
But there is a concept of Milchemes Rishus.
Yeah,
Isn't the very fact that there's a concept?
So the question is, how does war work? How are we allowed to fight a war? So what you're saying is correct. But you understand the question. In other words, it says v'chai b'hem. V'chai b'hem means that Jewish life is of more value than Eretz Yisrael.
That's true, but the Torah tells us it's not just Milchemes.
So how do we understand that? How does that fit into the value system?
You see for sure, because anytime you're fighting Milchemes, you're going to be sacrificing costs. That's for sure. So you see for sure the Torah is telling you need to have an army, you need to do a war.
Okay, good.
So meaning.
So take a look at this question. It's in the Minchas Chinuch on page 21. You see where the arrow is? And okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.